Hello, hello, hello. What's going on, people? Back again with another episode of Ancient Egypt. So, where did we leave off? We were talking about Alexander the Great. So Alexander goes to Egypt and builds Alexandria. Wasn't his first time building a city, but he builds Alexandria. And then after it's done, or in the middle of it, I'm really not sure, he takes off. He takes off for another adventure. So, Great Courses, the history of ancient Egypt, presented by Professor Bob Brier. Let's dig into it, shall we?
There have not been ancient cities found from pharaonic times. There was not a large population in Alexandria. So view it pretty much as open land. Part of the reason, I think, is, as I mentioned many times, the Egyptians were not good sailors. They weren't having a port ready to go out to the Mediterranean, They didn't need it as a port. They weren't going. They weren't sailing on the Wajur or the Great Green. So it's an open area. You can pretty much pick your spot and build your city. And he walks the land with Dinocrates. And according to the tradition, they lay out the city. They didn't have chalk. They wanted to use chalk. They didn't have chalk to lay out the streets. They used grain. So they used grain, dropping it along. And they laid out the city's streets. They laid out the city's streets in a grid at right angles. One of the early planned cities in the history of the world, right? To take advantage of the Mediterranean breezes, right? So it's right at the angle, so you'll get the breezes coming down the streets. And he founds the city of Alexandria and leaves. Alexander is going to conquer the world. Right?
Yay!
But just remember, Alexander is so different in many ways from Egyptians. He is founding a city, on a port, very Greek. So he's going to be able to do trading. He's viewing this with the future. This is not typical Egyptian isolationism, We're hemmed in by two deserts on one side, a river on another side, cataracts on the other side. Nobody's getting into us. No. Alexander's looking out. He wants trade. This is going to be a great city. And he was right. He picked the right spot. So he founds Alexandria and he leaves. Now, he leaves with his army. A large professional army. Large. 50,000. 50,000 men. The logistics of an army of 50,000 men is daunting. For example, if you have 50,000 men, how do you draw water from them from wells? You could have as many as maybe a dozen wells, and they'll die of thirst. You can't get enough water from wells for an army this big. How do you feed them? How do you feed 50,000 people? I mean, imagine a large football stadium, a reasonable sized football stadium, feeding all those people, maybe for months. Can you go into a small village? Certainly not. So to a great extent, Alexander's movements, the movements of his Macedonian army, were determined by where the food was, where the water was. You went to towns that had food. You went to places that had fresh water. And sometimes you even had to have ships carrying the water for your men. It's not the way you think, let's go here because it's a logical place to go. No, they're driven by needs. Now, if you were in Alexander's army, you were leaving home for maybe 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Think of that. It's sort of like kiss the kids goodbye for a while. Maybe you're coming back.
Mirror time.
You were going to march God knows where. Long campaigns. You can't come home quickly. 10 years.
And they signed up for this. They signed up for this. A job for you, Frank. Yeah, boss. Remember that little patch of land that I wanted to build on? Yeah, I remember that. Well, we're gonna need security. Okay, all right. We're gonna be gone for a while. What are we talking about? A couple of months? Ooh, well, it's gonna be at least about 2-3 years. What? Okay, boss. All right, I'll let the wife know. Boss, it's been 2 years. It don't seem like we making any headway. Yeah, plans have changed. It's going to be a little bit longer. Boss, I just want to see my kids. Is there any way? I can't do it, bruh. Looks like it might be another 5 years. That's 10 years, sir. 10 years? You got us out here for 10 years? Calm down. Everything will be okay. It's going to work out. Just trust me. Trust the process. How? How do you explain? How do you explain that to over 50,000 men that they ain't going home no time soon? It's going to be 10 years. Do you tell them in the beginning? Or is this something that developed after you got started? You're like, ooh, miscalculation. Yeah, it's going to take longer. What are you thinking? About 10 years? You think you should tell the troops that? Nah, let's not tell them right now. What? I'm not understanding that conversation. I just hate to be that guy. No. Because I'd probably turn around and go back. Or if I did stay, I'd be very, very resentful. And we having trouble finding water and food too on top of that? Wow. Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
You're leaving for, perhaps. Very different concept of what time was and what family relationships were. You know, you also get this as late as the 19th century when you read the early travelers to Egypt and the guys who were looking to discover the source of the Nile. You know, they were in this some godforsaken place. They get sick. What do? You wait there for 2 years till you get better, and then you don't go home. You press on looking for the source of the Nile. Different concept. These were people saying iron men and wooden ships. You know, these were tough people. And along with Alexander's army, 50,000, came hangers-on. People who were going to sell the army things, provisioners, women, right? It was quite an entourage. And they start moving, right? He goes all the way, Babylon, to Susa, to India, right? Walking all the way. Incredible, this army. Never defeated. Alexander was never defeated. That's part of the legend. He was a god, and his men believed it. They would follow him anywhere. Now they got to India. This has been a long campaign. I don't mean to suggest because you win all the time, it's all roses. It's not.
Nope.
And at India, Alexander wants to continue. Wants to keep going. His men are tired. They say, no more. It's no mas. They don't want to go on. They would like to go home. Right?
I figure they would.
Alexander relents. And they turn around in India and start the long march home. Now, on this long march, I should say this. Alexander was really a genius of sorts. You know, there is a tradition that Alexander was taught by Aristotle, the Greek philosopher. There's an interesting connection. Socrates was the teacher of Plato.
Oh, yeah, Plato.
Plato was the teacher of Aristotle,
That'll-
and the tradition is that Aristotle
Socrates.
was the teacher of Alexander the Great. And supposedly, when Alexander went on this long campaign, he sent back specimens for his teacher for his teacher Aristotle. He sent back, for example, mineral specimens. Remember, Aristotle wasn't just a philosopher. He was interested in everything. And Alexander never forgot his teacher, sending things back. But now it's time to go home. And they start to march back. Now, interestingly, the men would have encountered women that they had married. One of the things about Alexander was he felt that to really succeed at taking over a culture, you have to integrate into it. He wasn't this sort of conquer, beat 'em up. And he had his men marry foreign women. There were mass marriages. Mass marriages. Quite interesting. But they start the long march home. In Babylon, Alexander takes ill. He ran a fever for a considerable time. It sounds like he might have had dysentery, something like that. The way the illness is described, he may have had dysentery. But he lingered a long time. At one point, his generals knew he was dying. And there is a historical account that his generals gathered around him. Now, Alexander had conquered the known world, as we call it, a big chunk of the planet. And they asked him, "To whom does the kingdom go?" And you know Alexander's reply? The fittest. He didn't name a successor. It was going to go to whoever was the fittest, the strongest. So Alexander dies. And the kingdom that he conquered is divided. It's divided. Egypt, the subject of our 48 lectures, Egypt, is given to his general Ptolemy, trusted general, who will later, next time, become Ptolemy the First. But Ptolemy gets Egypt. But Alexander's story is sort of just beginning. His body, now remember, he's a god, worshipped by his men. I mean, when Ptolemy was given Egypt, he wouldn't even rule Egypt. Wouldn't even rule Egypt as a king, because he thought that maybe Alexander's son would do it, or something like that. Alexander's body lay in state in Babylon for a year. For a year. Now, the reason it's in Babylon is he dies there and they don't want to move it yet. They are bringing in gold and Greek craftsmen to fashion a catafalque.
Who?
In the shape of a tomb to transport the body of Alexander back to Macedon for burial. They wait a year. Now you might wonder, how do they preserve him? Now they didn't mummify him in the Egyptian way, probably. They wouldn't have had Egyptian embalmers. Right? We know that the body lay in spices, preserved in spices. There's also another source, and by the way, one of the sources for what we learn about Alexander is Suetonius. Interesting source, has some details about Alexander's burial. And one of the traditions is Alexander was mummified in white honey. Don't ask me. White honey.
Wow.
I mean, it sounds like Cairo syrup or something, but it could be that somehow resin was poured over him, maybe somehow, and that might be congealed white honey, might be viewed that way. But white honey is what they say. And this tomb out of gold is constructed. Right? It has scenes on it in gold of Alexander's great victories. Right? I mean, it must have been one of the greatest things ever constructed by man. And it is pulled by a team of mules who have gold bells on them. Gold bells. And the reason they have gold bells is so that as Alexander is being pulled from Babylon to Greece, right, to Macedonia, the towns will hear him approaching. and know that Alexander is coming. We even have one eyewitness report, somebody who actually saw it. Right? It must have been an incredible sight. I mean, people have never seen anything like this. But as Alexander's procession moves along, it reached Syria. Now, by this time, Ptolemy, the general who had been given Egypt, had taken residence, probably in Memphis, but they're constructing Alexandria, right, the city. He rides out, ostensibly to see the body of his fallen commander, Alexander. But he hijacks the body. He comes with an army and takes the body back to Egypt. Now, why? Well, one is, of course, Alexander's a god, and by having Alexander buried in Egypt, this is going to kind of sort of increase your prestige of your city. So the idea is, as you're building Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great, what better thing than to have the body of Alexander buried there? So he takes Alexander back to Egypt. Now, he prepares for him a tomb at Alexandria. We know the name of the tomb. It has a name. It's called the Soma. Soma. It just means the body. As in psychosomatic, that kind of thing. Just Soma, the body. And for years, the body of Alexander the Great lay at Memphis in state while the Soma was being built, constructed. We know the tradition. Alexander was buried in Alexandria. Virtually certain that Alexander the Great was buried in Alexandria. And the tradition is that he was buried at the crossroads of the two main streets of Alexandria. But as you probably know, the tomb of Alexander the Great has not been found yet. The reason is that Alexandria really grew, and it changed. And over the years, the crossroads of the two main streets has disappeared. We don't know what the two main streets were in ancient times. We're not sure. So the body of Alexander has kind of disappeared in history. We know for sure that later people saw it. Later, Greeks in Egypt, ruling the Ptolemies, dug it up for the gold coffin.
Oh, wow.
Melted down the gold, and gave him a crystal coffin, they said. So Alexander has been seen after his burial, but his tomb has disappeared. You may have heard in the newspaper reports, maybe 5 years ago, that a woman claimed to have found the tomb of Alexander at Siwa. Now, there is a tradition that Alexander asked to be buried at Siwa also, because the oracle proclaimed him there a god. And this woman working outside of Siwa, a Greek woman, and that's important, I think, she would have loved to have found Alexander's body, claimed to have found the tomb of Alexander. I've been to that tomb. Believe me, it has nothing to do with Alexander the Great.
Wow.
Her translator was her husband, who's a businessman, who's Greek, but not that he reads ancient Greek well, and he did some strange translations of some Greek that says nothing like what they said it was. It wasn't the tomb of Alexander. Everybody agrees now. It was a bit of a hoax, if anything.
That's crazy. That is crazy. So, wow. I don't know what to say about that. How, my guy, how do you hijack a body? You know, a lot of people love their mama and their uncle and their great uncles, but I'm not about to get out of here and grab some of my homies and hijack the body from the funeral home, hold everybody at gunpoint. Oh my God, what's going on? You just take our jewelry and just leave. Can't you see we're in mourning? I don't want your damn jewelry. I want him. The dead guy right there. like, I understand he was grief stricken, but that's, you steal the man's body as clout. Yeah, I got Alexander here. Yeah, he built this city. Y'all want to see his body? You're going to pay. What? I mean, I'm not understanding. I'm throwing out theories, but I'm not understanding why. Why? You got the whole damn country of Egypt. You got the town of Alexandria. Let the man... Damn. Ain't that man done enough for y'all in life? It's like, to me, it's like, I know you're dying, but could you come into work today? Like, what? I know it's your off day, but we really need you. Why? That's just crazy. They didn't mummify him necessarily. That's just, I'm not understanding that. How? Why? Why, more importantly, not how, because he got his own army, so I know I can figure out how he did it, but why did he do it? That I just let's continue.
A bit of a hoax. So the search for Alexander the Great goes on. That is one, often I'm asked, are there any great discoveries to be made? That's one. The tomb of Alexander the Great is still out there, waiting to be found. Some people even think they know where it is, right underneath the Nebi Daniel Mosque in Alexandria. But it's difficult to excavate there. It's a mosque. You can't tear it down. Maybe Alexander's tomb will be found in our lifetime. It's a real possibility. But Alexander starts 300 years of Greeks ruling Egypt. And that's what we'll talk about next time. See you then.
300 years is a long damn time. And at some point, the Muslims come in. They converted a lot of the Sudanese people into the Muslim religion. And the Sudanese, ancient Kush, were black. So at some point in ancient history, black people converted over to Muslim faith, Muslim religion. But with all these different people, different nationalities, different skin tones, they just start getting together. And you heard what Professor Breyer said. He said that you got a lot of soldiers, captains, and probably some generals too, that married foreigners. They married some of these Egyptian women. So, at some point in time, Egypt's culture and Egypt's skin tone, the skin tone of the Egyptian people started to get lighter. I mean, it is what it is. What can you say? You take over a country, you invite your boys over, You know, they checking out the scenery, checking out the natives. Sooner or later, somebody gonna wanna, you know, get it in. They're away from their family, their wives for 5-10 years. Yeah, they gonna want to get it in. Now, whether they stayed married to these chicks or left them the first chance they got, I'm thinking some of these women got left behind. When that guy had a chance, that Greek had a chance to go home to his real wife, yeah. I think that may have been the start of the baby mama. Yes, sir. Well, that's all for this episode. Comments, criticisms. You know what to do. Till next time. Be good. I'll talk to you later.